So for the next 30 minutes, we will talk about SaaS product metrics, from picking the right ones to monitoring them in order to develop useful products. So I'll invite on stage Billy. Billy, please take the stage and tell us who are your guests. And of course, more details about your presentation, your panel discussion, because it will be a panel.
Thanks, Gabi. Hi, everyone. I'm Billy, and I will be the host for the next 30 minutes. I invite our panelists, Martin from Mind the Product, Edial from Gitsy and former Eventbrite, Vladimir from Hootsuite, and Kalman from Prezi. Okay, so we have a kind of a hard challenge because we have only 30 minutes. It's a very broad topic. What we'll try to do is to recreate a bit the vibes and the atmosphere from our Product Tank meetups. So Product Tank is a product community. We have monthly meetups, and we invite everyone who is has a passion for developing products to join us. Okay, so now by show of hands, because we know to adapt, we want to adapt our questions and everything to the audience. How many of you are startup founders? Okay. How many of you are product managers in companies? Okay. And how many of you have more than 1 year of experience in product metrics? Okay, thanks. All right, so let's jump to the questions. I've reached out to the product community for a couple of questions, and then we'll open up to the public. Good. First question. Could you give us some practical examples of using product metrics to take really important decisions for the products you've been developing at some point in your experience? I know it's a very broad.
It's a very broad question. I think any product manager probably has those experiences, right, where you're using data, because hopefully you are using data to make your decisions. Specifically, I think I can think of a good example that's now far enough in the past that I can talk about it fairly openly as well, which is when I was at Huddle, which is software as a service collaboration tool, kind of competing with Microsoft SharePoint. We originally launched as a freemium product, and we thought everybody from your local church group to big corporations needed to use Huddle to kind of organize all their projects and all their little tasks. And so we had a freemium product, right? So we had free at the bottom end, and then we were trying to sell £100,000 deals at the corporate end or the governments. And you didn't have to take too long, about 6 months of like looking at the data of where the sales were going and the objections you were getting back on sales, that just doesn't work. Like no matter how much you differentiate the packages, it's very hard to have a free product sitting next to a £100,000 product on the same pricing page. So I think that's one of the clearest examples for me where just using that kind of data pushed back and made us really change the product and get rid of the freemium platform and just move towards completely seat-based sales pricing, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, my background is mostly like two-sided marketplaces. So at Gitsy, at Eventbrite, at Get Your Guide, the same. So there's like consumers and there's a business-to-business part. Yeah, I think the most interesting metric that I've seen there was definitely at Eventbrite, where we figured out that if you turn an attendee into an organizer, that's a huge win, right? So there was it was extremely actionable because it was just like setting up an event. And that was a very, very important metric, especially in the beginning. And I think after that, it turned more into kind of more traditional SaaS metric. I think like cohorts and revenue over time and customer contact through this partner and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think finding an actionable metric is a really big challenge in the beginning if you're a SaaS platform, because yeah, cohorts will take a while to build up, right? And revenue as well. So another one that I've seen like used in a good way, I think, is qualified leads. I think it was a good one because it's very actionable. It's like it's a number, and you can say whether it's qualified or not, and you can increase it every week or every day. That was another nice one. I think it's actionable for small startups.
Okay.
Yeah, no. For me, it's the metrics are more important before building something than afterwards. So the more we as product managers have access to numbers that prove some facts, the better early on. So one thing that I learned is to always try to challenge any assumption that you're trying to base some functionality on to make sure if that's right. The majority of the time, when you have, I don't know, your VP of product or your CEO who has this big vision and he knows exactly how a certain feature or functionality needs to work, I think it's very healthy to actually try to get some numbers behind that that assumption. So there are plenty of cases where our assumptions turned wrong, and it's very frustrating as a product manager to realize that only after you spend a month or 2 months or 3 months building a certain feature. So I think we learned our lessons, and clearly I learned my lesson. So we are trying to double, triple check every assumption that we are building a certain product on. I don't know, there are a lot of examples. To think about the one that's recent in in the stuff that we're working on, there's a big debate on managing data sets inside Hootsuite and inside Uberview, which is my previous company. And if you talk to our senior leadership, they have very strong opinions on how a certain list of documents should be managed, deleted, organized, and stuff like that. And that can definitely put us in a rat hole of building a lot of functionality for it. You actually look at the data, and that's not actually a problem. I mean, most of the actions that we would have to optimize do not actually happen that often, and you talk to customers and no one seems to have that issue. So checking metrics early on saves you time, wasted time that could be built functionality that nobody needs, and gives you the opportunity to focus on the real problems. And for me, that's the most important thing. Look at the metrics before building something rather than afterwards.
So what we do with Prezi, and what I like the most, as a product manager, your job is to create a customer. This is one thing, and the end of the story is when the customer came back. So the renew. So it depends on how big is that window. So if you have a annual payment, this is a year, so it's really hard to follow what's going on within a year. So if it's a month, then it's sometimes easier. But first of all, customer creation is the most important thing, and how you set the paywall, how you keep the balance between the free users and the paying users. So even if you grow, you have to check all the time that this balance is the same, or it's something you have to manage, and how your users coming back. And if it's a long period, like a year, you have to find some milestones between them. So for us, we have a stepping stone that if the users reach that point within a week, they're more likely to renew after a year. Or we have a monthly, and 6 months later, we have a checkpoint as well. Of course, these connections are really, really vague. So you shouldn't trust. So this is not 100% sure that somebody reached that point after 1 week, but you can give a feedback quite quickly, and you can think about it, what you're doing. I think when you develop something, it's very important to get the feedback as early as possible, and you have to connect to your big goal, which is keeping the customer.
Okay, thanks. The next question would be around mistakes, because of course the theory and the successful examples are all nice. Could you share any mistakes that you've done, if any, when using metrics to make product decisions? For example, chasing the wrong metrics. There's this whole discussion about actionable and vanity metrics.
I mean, I can definitely share a mistake about internal metrics, I think, which is important as well. So, again, this was a few years ago, and we were probably early in kind of full implementation of Scrum and kind of burn down charts and velocity and all that kind of stuff. And we probably over-focused on velocity, for example. So we were looking too much, how many points are we delivering every sprint? And we started incentivizing the team around that. And of course, that just means that everyone starts overestimating everything. So I think we definitely went down the rabbit hole too far on a metric and kind of were looking at the wrong thing, right? We weren't incentivizing building the right thing, we were just incentivizing on building stuff. And I think that's also, I mean, I think it's one of the best examples I have, but I think it's analogous to what you do with the product as well, of just don't focus on the wrong metric, be very careful about what you choose to measure. And I think the big thing for me is getting the right balance between kind of actionable business metrics, so whether it's conversion rate or your rate of customer acquisition or all the classic kind of LTV and MRR kind of metrics that you would have in a SaaS business, and balancing that with actual user metrics. Are you actually solving user problems? Are you doing delivering value to the end user? Whether you're using Net Promoter Score or those kind of milestones in the app that show that people are engaging with it, that they're using it, that they're getting the value they need from the product. You have to have that balance with the kind of the really actionable business stuff.
Yeah, I think for me it was, we had similar metrics. Like I think they're kind of, a little bit vanity, right? Like try to be as fast as possible. They create like an N-type pattern, right? Where people overestimate the task and they start like sandbagging a bit. We had a thing which was kind of like, it's kind of like the idea of a compound metric, right? So you have one metric that comes from multiple metrics. I think that's, you try to get like, there's always this thing, right, where you think, oh, if someone does 4 posts on Twitter or has 10 friends, then it's successful, right? You hear these stories. So in the beginning, I think you're trying to find this metric. I think sometimes they exist. I think they're always exaggerated. That's my kind of. I've never seen it in real life, like from an actual person I talk to. It's like, it's how it works. But then, we spent a lot of time finding this compound metric, and it was a waste of time because we couldn't find it really, and it was too early to make any decisions, and we had too little data to base it on anything. And your early users are very different than the ones that you will acquire later, and they come from different acquisition channels, etc., etc., etc. It was like, I think compound metrics are great when the company is mature and you've found like product market fit. I think then you can kind of make decisions that are based on better data. But we looked at the compound metrics way too early, and we just didn't find anything, and we spent a lot of time on this, and it was a waste.
I don't know. I think the biggest mistake that I did was trying to optimize a metric that I did not understand. And the way that happened is the customer in my head was different than the actual customer. So at Uberview, we started very similarly with Huddle in our assumption that everyone will use this tool, and it's an SMB tool. So the customer in our head was a very uninformed, busy marketer trying to make it in the world of social. And we are trying to apply all the typical metrics for a SaaS business in terms of funnel acquisition, retention, all those things. And the metrics did not look good, and we worked very, very hard trying to optimize with packaging and wording and feature set and all of these. Not until we actually got on a phone with some of these customers and we realized that they don't look at all as the customers that we were building this product for. And once we understood who those customers are and what they needed, we were able to come up with a set of metrics that correctly measure the business that we were in. So it's very easy for junior product manager or a CEO to read all the blogs and get a set of metrics and apply that template to their business, and that could do a lot of damage if you don't really understand what those metrics should mean and the people that they should apply to. Yeah, and mistakes like these can be fatal.
I really like the velocity example. I gave up the measure of velocity 3 years ago because I realized how the inflation of the story points, which is incredible. What I'm doing these days is I like to calculate the return of investment. So if I think this is a 2 months long project, then I calculate the cost of the engineers and the people who work on it, and we're thinking about it. It's really worth to do that. So, or when we will get back the money, if it's possible to calculate. At least it helps to compare the ideas that has in the backlog. The second thing that I mentioned that I came to my mind is not enough to measure the income, the revenue, and we started to separate the revenue to bad revenue and good revenue. So bad revenue is something is paying for an annual license, but they don't use it, so they never coming back. So, and if this but of course there will be those kind of persons, so you couldn't push down to the zero. But if the ratio will change, and this is a good sign that something goes wrong. And even if you have this annual license type, you will realize it much later than you have to.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's open it up to the public. So if you guys have questions, okay.
You can just ask and we can repeat it.
Can you just ask and I repeat it?
Well, we're trying as hard as possible not to. Yeah, so the question is, how do you go back to your boss when he has a clear idea for a feature that is not backed up by data? Well, we are trying as much as possible not to get into a debate about the validity of their ideas, and to just present the numbers. This does not mean that your idea is good or bad. It's just these are the numbers. And most of the time it works. I mean, we probably need to work on our diplomacy a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of my only secret. I don't know what else. I mean, it depends on who the boss is and how he will take it. But I'm not trying to dispute a specific idea. It's actually based on your input. I tried to do a little research, and go figure, there aren't so many people having this problem. So happy to pursue it, but that's actually nothing there. Yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I would just add to that I think a really powerful messaging tool you can use in that is if you're balancing, hopefully, qualitative data with quantitative, so you're actually talking to customers. If you can bring some of those stories back, whether it's video or voice recording or whatever, and the CEO or the CPO or whoever it is that you're trying to convince actually hears a customer say, oh, this is my pain point, and then you ask them, what about this? Oh, I don't care about that. Like, if you really hear it from the mouth of the customer, that helps a lot, because sometimes you can lose yourself in the data and you're like, but I know there's out there somewhere and you're just not talking to the right people. But like, if you actually hear it from a person, that can help.
Can you give us an example of calculating the ROI for a feature? How you calculate, especially if you have a freemium product?
Mhm. So, of maybe you know the cost of the developers, and if you know the feature, you should know the how much you have to pay for Amazon service to launch it. We have a calculation about the value of the Prezi View, Prezi Show, or a new user. You know, we have of course they are not 100% clear or sure, but at least we have something that we can use to compare each features to each other. It doesn't mean that we will put this to the financial plan. We use it to compare the features or the ideas to each other. So we have that kind of value of each user action, and we'll check the feature that we plan to develop, what kind of user action will be increased. So there should be a strong hypothesis behind your idea.
Hello. One question I have is related to the velocity. I believe we all have been through this, and although we like the metric, it doesn't necessarily become real. The question is, what do you replace? What do you use to measure the sprint efficiency instead of story points and so on for the development teams?
I'm maybe going to be slightly controversial and say I don't care anymore. I more and more, I don't know if you saw my talks, more and more I believe in having autonomous teams that kind of run themselves, decide themselves what they want to be building, decide themselves how they want to run, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or whatever. And there's a lot of trust there, and there's a lot of proof that the team knows what they're doing and that they're delivering. But ultimately, it's about delivering outcomes, and it's about delivering metrics, right? So you target the whole team on hitting a certain metric and moving a certain objective, and that's the outcome that we care about. Whether they spend, 5 hours playing on the Xbox and they still hit that objective, that's fine. Like, we don't care about the velocity per se. And I think a lot of it comes from that trust. And there's a lot of, when a team becomes autonomous and knows that they own their own mastery, they also kind of self-police a little bit. So you don't have to worry about someone slacking off or whatever, because the team kind of makes sure that the team's working because they all want to hit that goal, right? And it sounds kind of slightly evil to do that, but it's about the team kind of owning their own destiny rather than management telling them, oh, you haven't written enough stories, you haven't written enough lines of code. Like, who cares? Like, are you actually hitting the outcome for the customer? That's all I care about.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like someone unable to do something or someone to be like unwilling to do something, right? I think it could be different things, right? But you assume that if you work somewhere, you're going to do your best, right? If that's not the case, then something else is wrong, right? Like, velocity doesn't help with that. I think like you will always find ways how you can like not be productive because you don't want to be productive. But I think sometimes it is good to look at engineers who estimate things and then never reach that, right? Where there's something it could be being willing or it could be unwilling, but something is kind of, it's not wrong, but yeah, something is happening there, right? Maybe this engineer gets distracted a lot, or maybe there's too much on his plate, or too many projects, or like it could be like a lot of things. But I think you should have this conversation, but it's just not a metric, because I think there's different problems, or there's different things that make that happen, right? But it's not a success metric or failure metric, I think.
Yeah, I don't care either about the micromanagement of points anymore. What we started doing at Hootsuite recently, and again, I mean, the engineering team is still using points and measurement of velocity. It's just that I don't care, and the other product managers don't care either. But what we're doing is we're trying to use t-shirt size estimation for projects, and that's not necessarily for the engineering or product managers, but it's helping the C-level executives make better decisions. So the way it works is this team has a velocity of I don't know, 3 sizes of L and 2 M's and 1 S per year. And on the table there are, I don't know, 100 projects grouped into 3 teams. So knowing that there's not enough time to do it all, it forces a discussion on what is the theme or the initiative that we want to pursue. And I think that offers then greater clarity to the product management and the engineering and the other teams, and what happens afterwards in terms of story points, whatever. Yeah.
Well, I can tell the same. I think if you have this kind of problem, I would start to think about how you can engage more your developers. Maybe they don't understand what they're doing, or they don't understand the company goal, or they not fit in the culture. I don't know, but this is not something that about Velocity.
I think, again, slightly controversial, but another way to think about it is actually something we did in some projects in Huddle was we didn't care about estimating the story. We didn't care about kind of prioritizing stories per se. Instead, we kind of budgeted time. So we said, you know, we would time box it basically in Agile speak. We would say, we want to spend 3 months of this team's time fixing this user problem. And then it was up to that team to figure out the best things that they could do within that time and pick from the stories in the backlog that they had, knowing how much time they could, what they could get done and what they wanted to do to hit that target. So it's kind of flipping it around and saying, instead of estimating everything and then trying to figure out what you can fit in, just kind of flip it around and go, actually, this problem is worth this much investment from us to hit this, you know, hit a metric goal, and then let the team try to figure out the best way to do that.
Other questions? Okay. I have some questions. All right. So, Edial, you were mentioning about the change of the metrics that you primarily focus on, depending on the product lifecycle. So, if you guys could share some examples about this, about how the primary metrics, product metrics, changed for you and your product teams.
Well, I guess we are obligated to measure the usual suspects, the DAUs and the MAUs and all those things, because there are people in the company who wants to look at those. The metrics that I'm interested in are metrics that are either confirming or not confirming a certain assumption that we based a certain product decision on. And when I'm looking at a specific data set, is trying to find patterns that that I don't know, or anomalies that we should investigate further. I mean, for me, the metrics is just a starting point. The metrics themselves don't tell you what you should do per se. It just gives you a starting point of an investigation. And I look for those things. Why is it that, I don't know, we had a jump in usage of this feature on a Friday? I mean, we had that in Uberview, and yeah, you ignore it a week, you ignore it 2 weeks, but after a while, you're curious, what is happening here? And did we ship any new features? No. What happens? And through investigation, you can actually find some gems or some understandings, an understanding about your client that will allow you to correct a mistake or to take advantage of a new opportunity. So these are kind of the metrics that I look at. The majority of the DAUs and the other regular metrics rarely change so significant. I mean, after you look at these metrics for a month or two, you can probably predict what the third month will look like unless anything crazy happens. But when you launch a new feature and you craft a specific set of metrics to measure the usage, maybe you'll find something in there that just doesn't look right, and you, through investigation, drilling into that metric, identifying those customers, giving them a call, looking over a recording or something like that, you can actually find out why is that metric that way. And for me, that's key. Understanding why is that number or that chart look the way it does.
Yeah, I would also say if you start understanding your business better, it's much easier to change your metrics because of that, right? Like revenue, yeah, that's a goal for everyone, but what drives that revenue? Where can that revenue grow fast? Like that's a different thing, right? That you're pushing. Like it's not going to be just revenue; it's going to be retention or whatever. I think, yeah, as your business matures, it should become more clear.
A lot of these metrics can be faked. I mean, like even revenue. I mean, if you are going for revenue, you can buy revenue. I mean, there are a lot of companies who are doing that. So, if you don't, I'm trying not to measure these products just because someone is asking me to, or I have to report my performance based on some crazy KPI that someone invented or read on a blog. But trying to use these KPIs to help me and my team build a better product that will make someone a happier customer. For me, that's the goal.
I think the key in speaking about scaling, I think the key is early on. I can't remember who wrote the post, but there's a famous post about do the things that don't scale, right? So if you're just launched your startup, yes, you should probably have some basic metrics and stuff in there, but like there's no point trying to measure your conversion rate when you have like 10 users, right? So go and talk to them. Like that is the big thing. Get out of the fucking building, use the phone and go and talk to them. And data, metrics will give you data, but they will never give you insights. So I think what Vladimir said is really important, that you can see these data spikes and you can try to figure out what's going on in the data. But really what that is an impetus to go out and talk to your customers again and understand why is this happening? Why are you using it more on Friday? Oh, that's really interesting. And then that might be behavior that you want to drive more of. So I think it's getting that mix right, but then also understanding that early on, your data is not going to mean very much. You can't A/B test when you have 100 users. Like, just talk to people. That's what's going to work. And then as you scale, use the data to drive what you want to talk to them about.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
A closing remark.
Please.
I wanted to add a bit to what Andrei was saying. I think that the number of successful startups from the region will increase if, along with the technical skills, really good technical skills that we have in Romania and in the region, we also develop the product skills. So please keep this in mind, as it's very important. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Product Tank Bucharest. Thank you guys for sharing your experience with us.